Branches whip past my face as I run, boots sinking into the soft earth of Ghost River's pine woods. The only light is the thin beam of my flashlight, flickering as the batteries struggle against the cold. Somewhere behind me, I hear Deputy Carter's breathless voice, but the radio clipped to my shoulder is dead, just a faint hiss of static, no matter how many times I try to call for backup. The air is thick with fog, and every sound seems to echo, bouncing off the trees and vanishing into the dark. We'd come out here chasing a call, strange lights by the river, a scream that cut through the night. It was supposed to be routine, just another wild goose chase in a county that's seen more than its share of ghost stories. But now, with the woods closing in and something moving just out of sight, I know this is different. I can feel it in my bones, the way the old-timers always said you would. If you're reading this, remember the rules. That's what I keep telling myself over and over, like a prayer. The rules are the only thing standing between us and whatever is out here. I can't see it, not clearly, but I know it's hunting us. I've seen the signs, strange claw marks on the trees, footprints that start and stop in the mud, the sudden, unnatural silence that falls when the wind shifts. Carter stumbles, nearly falling, and I grab his arm, pulling him upright. "Keep moving," I whisper. "Don't look back." That's rule number 3. Never look back when you hear footsteps that don't belong. The old laws, curfews, patrol schedules, even the badge on my chest don't mean a thing out here. Not after dark. Not when the river fog rolls in and the woods start to whisper. The thing in the trees circles us, never coming close enough to see, but always there, always watching. I can hear it breathing, slow and deep, like the river itself. Carter's eyes are wide with fear, and I know he's thinking about the stories, the warnings we all laughed off in daylight. If you're reading this, if you ever find yourself in Ghost River County after dark, don't trust the old laws. Don't trust the badge. Remember the rules. They're the only thing that might save you. And if you break them, you might not live to see the dawn. My name is Eli Mercer, and I've worn the badge of sheriff in Ghost River County for nearly 12 years. Folks around here say the land remembers, and I believe them. This county is a patchwork of pine forests, winding creeks, and old, forgotten roads that twist through the hills like veins. The river that gives the county its name runs cold and fast, cutting through the heart of the land, shrouded in mist most mornings and haunted by stories every night. I grew up here, the son of a game warden and a school librarian. My father taught me to track deer and read the weather by the shape of the clouds. My mother taught me to respect the past, to listen when the elders spoke, and to never ignore a warning, no matter how strange it sounded. I left for a while, college, a stint in the city police, but the river called me home. It always does. Ghost River County is the kind of place where everyone knows your name, and every family has a story about something they can't explain. Some talk about the lights that dance over the water on moonless nights. Others whisper about the old burial mounds in the woods, or the voices that drift through the fog when the wind is just right. Most of the time, it's just talk, but sometimes the stories are warnings. On my first day as sheriff, the outgoing chief handed me a battered notebook. "These are the rules," he said, his voice low. "Not the ones in the law books, the real ones. The ones that keep you alive when the sun goes down." I flipped through the pages, 10 rules, each one stranger than the last. Never patrol alone after midnight. Never cross the river bridge on foot after dark. If you hear your name called from the woods, don't answer. If you find a circle of stones, don't step inside. If you see a lantern swinging in the trees, turn back. We have rules for a reason, he told me. Every one of them was written in blood. Don't break them, Eli. Not even once. I nodded, half listening, thinking it was just small-town superstition. But as the years passed, I learned to respect the rules. I learned that the old laws, curfews, patrols, even the badge, don't always matter when the sun goes down and the river fog rolls in. I learned that sometimes the only thing standing between you and what hunts after dark is a handful of rules, passed down by those who survived. Now, every time I pin on my badge and step into the night, I carry those rules with me. Because out here, the old laws don't protect us. And if you forget that, even for a moment, you might not make it home. It started with the coyotes. Normally, they keep to the hills, their yips and howls echoing at the edge of town. But one morning, I found a pack huddled together in the middle of Main Street, silent and wide-eyed, refusing to move even when I honked the cruiser's horn. Their fur was bristled, their eyes fixed on the woods beyond the river, as if something out there had driven them from their own territory. A few days later, Mrs. Hargrove called about her cattle. She'd found them pressed against the far fence, refusing to graze near the tree line. When I checked, I saw deep claw marks in the bark of the old oaks, too high for any dog, too wide for a bobcat. I took photos, filed a report, and told her it was probably a bear. But I knew better. Bears don't leave tracks that vanish halfway across a muddy field. Then the missing persons started. First, it was a fisherman from out of town, last seen launching his boat at dusk. We found his truck, his tackle box, even his boots by the water's edge, but no sign of him. The search dogs lost his scent at the riverbank, and the only clue was a set of footprints leading into the reeds, prints that stopped abruptly, as if he'd been lifted off the ground. A week later, a local teenager disappeared on her way home from a friend's house. Her bike was found leaning against a fence, the front wheel still spinning. No struggle, no sign of a fall, just a single set of footprints leading into the woods, swallowed by the undergrowth. Her mother swore she heard her daughter's voice calling from the trees that night, but when she went to look, there was nothing but fog and silence. I tried to focus on the usual work, traffic stops, break-ins, the occasional bar fight, but the unease grew with every shift. The deputies started pairing up for night patrols, even the old-timers who used to laugh at the rules. The radio chatter changed, too. Jokes gave way to nervous questions, and every call after dark was answered with a little more hesitation. The elders from the reservation came to the station one evening, their faces grave. They brought tobacco and sage, and they spoke in low voices. "The river is restless," one of them said, her eyes never meeting mine. "It remembers. Tell your people to be careful. Don't go out alone. Don't answer if you hear your name." I nodded, promising to pass on the warning, but I could feel the old fear settling in my bones. I wanted to believe it was just a bad season, just coincidence. But deep down, I knew better. The land was changing, and the first signs were only the beginning. In Ghost River County, the stories are never just stories for long. After the third disappearance, the station felt different. The deputies were quieter, the laughter gone from the break room. That night, Deputy Amos, who'd been in Ghost River County longer than anyone, called a meeting in the squad room. He set a battered notebook on the table, its cover worn smooth by years of use. "We need to talk about the rules," Amos said, his voice low. "Not the ones in the code book. The real ones. The ones that keep you breathing when the sun goes down." He started with the first: never patrol alone after midnight. Back in '89, Deputy Lane thought he could handle a call by himself. He never came back. We found his cruiser, engine running, lights on, but Lane was gone. The only thing left was his hat, sitting on the hood. "If you hear your name called from the woods, don't answer." Amos's eyes flicked to the window. The wind can play tricks, but sometimes it's not the wind. If you answer, you might find yourself walking deeper into the trees, and you might not find your way back. Don't cross the river bridge on foot after dark. There's something about that bridge. People say they see lanterns swinging under the planks, hear footsteps behind them. Last time someone tried it, we found their flashlight on the far side, still warm. No sign of them. If you find a circle of stones, don't step inside. Some say they're old boundary markers, others say they're something else. Either way, folks who step inside sometimes come out different, or not at all. If you see a lantern swinging in the trees, turn back. It's not a rescue party. It's not a lost hiker. If you follow it, you won't come back. Amos paused, letting the silence settle. These aren't just stories. Every rule has a reason. Every one was written because someone didn't come back. You break one, and you might not either. He handed the notebook to me, his hands steady but his eyes haunted. "Keep this close, Eli. The rules are the only thing standing between you and what's out there. Don't let yourself forget." The room was silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts. I tucked the notebook into my jacket, feeling its weight. The rules weren't just tradition, they were survival. And as the night deepened outside, I realized just how much depended on remembering every single one. In Ghost River County, the rules are more than words. They're the line between coming home and becoming another story whispered by the river. It was Deputy Riley's first month on the job. Fresh from the academy, full of energy and city confidence, he was eager to prove himself. He'd heard the stories, of course, but he treated them like small-town folklore, something to laugh about over coffee, not something to take seriously. I tried to warn him, but he just grinned and said, "I'll stick to the real laws, Sheriff." That week, Riley and I were assigned to check the old river bridge after a report of trespassers. The sun was setting, painting the water gold, and the air was thick with the smell of pine and mud. I reminded him, "We don't cross the bridge on foot after dark. That's the rule." He rolled his eyes. "Come on, Ellie. It's just a bridge." Before I could stop him, Riley stepped onto the planks, his boots echoing in the quiet. I stayed on the bank, watching the shadows lengthen. He made it halfway across, then stopped, peering down at something beneath the bridge. "Sheriff, are you seeing this?" he called. I moved closer, but all I saw was the river, dark and fast, swirling around the pilings. That's when the air changed. The wind died, and the woods on both sides of the river fell silent. Riley's radio crackled with static, then went dead. He turned, suddenly uneasy. "Did you hear that?" he asked. I shook my head. but I could feel the old fear settling in my chest. We finished the check and headed back to the cruiser. Riley tried to laugh it off, but his hands shook as he buckled his seatbelt. That night, he called me from his porch, voice low. "Sheriff, I keep hearing someone outside. Sounds like my brother, but he's been gone for years. Keep calling my name." The next morning, Riley looked pale and tired. He said he hadn't slept, that the voice had circled his house all night, always just out of sight. I wanted to believe it was just nerves, just the stress of a new job. But deep down, I knew better. The rules weren't just for tradition, they were warnings. Riley had broken one, and something in Ghost River County had noticed. From that day on, Riley never crossed the bridge after dark again. But the damage was done. The line between story and reality had started to blur, and my own skepticism was beginning to crack. I realized then that out here, even a small mistake could have consequences you might never see coming. In Ghost River County, the rules are the only thing that keep the darkness at bay. It was a Thursday night when the sky changed. I was in my office, finishing paperwork, when the lights flickered and the world outside the window seemed to dim all at once. Not the slow fade of sunset, but a sudden, suffocating blackness that swallowed the last traces of daylight. The street lamps along Main flickered, then died. The only light left was the pale glow of my desk lamp, and even that seemed to struggle against the dark pressing at the glass. The phone rang, 3 sharp bursts, then silence. I picked up, but all I heard was static. I tried the radio, switching through every channel, but there was nothing. No chatter from the deputies, no weather updates, not even the usual late-night truckers on the highway. Just a low, humming buzz, as if the air itself was holding its breath. I stepped outside, flashlight in hand, and found the town empty. Doors were closed, windows shuttered, and not a single car moved along the road. The darkness was thick, almost physical, and the air was colder than it should have been for early autumn. I tried to call for backup, but my cell was dead, the screen frozen and lifeless. That's when I saw the fog rolling in from the river, thick and low, curling around the buildings and swallowing the street. It moved with purpose, creeping up the steps of the station, pressing against the door. I remembered the rules. Never open the door to the fog. Never leave the station alone after dark. Never trust a voice that calls from outside. I locked the doors, checked the windows, and waited. The old laws, curfews, patrol schedules, even the badge on my chest felt useless. Out here, on this kind of night, the only thing that mattered were the rules passed down by those who'd survived before me. I heard footsteps outside, slow and deliberate, circling the building. Sometimes they stopped right by the window, and I could feel eyes watching me from the dark. The urge to call out, to demand a name or a badge number, was strong, but I kept silent. That's rule number 6. Never speak first when the night is thick. The hours crawled by, the darkness pressing closer, the fog tapping at the glass like curious fingers. I clung to the rules, repeating them in my mind, hoping they'd be enough. Because in Ghost River County, when the old laws fail and the night comes alive, the rules are all that's left between you and whatever waits outside. The fog pressed against the station windows, thick as wool, and the darkness outside felt alive. I sat at my desk, every light in the building on, but it barely pushed back the gloom. The silence was broken only by the occasional creak of the old floorboards and the distant, hollow sound of something moving through the trees. I tried the radio again, still nothing but static. Then the voices started. At first, it was just a whisper, like wind slipping through a crack in the wall. But soon, I could make out words, my name, spoken in a dozen different tones. Some sounded like old friends, some like deputies long gone, some like my own voice echoing back at me. I gripped the edge of the desk, heart pounding, and forced myself to remember the rules. Never answer when the night calls your name. I moved to the window, careful not to get too close. Through the fog, I saw shapes moving between the trees, tall, thin figures, their limbs too long, their movements too smooth to be human. Their eyes glinted in the darkness, reflecting the faint light from the station. They circled the building, never coming too close, but always watching, always waiting. Suddenly, a heavy thud sounded at the back door. I froze, listening as slow, deliberate footsteps moved along the porch. The doorknob rattled, and a voice called out, "Sheriff Mercer, it's Deputy Carter. Let me in." But I knew Carter was on the other side of the county, miles away. The voice was close, too close, and it was wrong, just a little too flat, a little too eager. I backed away, repeating the rules under my breath. Never open the door to a voice you can't see. Never trust what comes out of the fog. The shapes pressed closer, their shadows stretching across the yard, their whispers growing louder, overlapping in a chorus of hunger and invitation. I heard a window rattle, then another. The urge to run, to hide, to call for help was overwhelming, but I forced myself to stay put. The rules were all I had. I locked every door, checked every window, and waited, heart hammering in my chest. The night dragged on, the threats outside growing bolder, the voices more insistent. But I held fast to the rules, refusing to give in to fear. Because in Ghost River County, when the hunt emerges from the dark, the only thing standing between survival and disaster is knowing which rules to follow, and having the strength not to break them, no matter what you hear in the night. The tension in the station was unbearable. I wasn't alone anymore. Deputy Carter and Deputy Riley had made it back just before the fog rolled in, both pale and shaken from their own encounters on the road. We sat together in the main room, listening to the voices outside, the shapes circling the building, the wind rattling the windows. The rules were all we talked about, all we clung to. But fear has a way of wearing people down. Carter, usually steady as a rock, started pacing, glancing at the door every time a voice called his name. "It sounds just like my dad," he whispered, voice trembling. "He's out there. He needs help." Riley tried to calm him, but the voices grew louder, more desperate, promising safety, forgiveness, a way out. Then, in a moment of panic, Carter broke. He rushed to the back door, fumbling with the lock. "I have to help him," he shouted. Before we could stop him, he flung the door open and stepped into the fog. The cold rushed in, and for a split second, I saw a shadow move past the threshold, tall, thin, and impossibly fast. The door slammed shut behind him, and the station fell silent. Riley stared at me, eyes wide with fear. "What do we do?" he whispered. I forced myself to stay calm, to remember the rules. "We don't go after him," I said, my voice steady. "We stay together. We lock the doors. We wait for dawn. We barricaded the entrances, checked every window, and sat back to back in the center of the room, repeating the rules like a mantra. The voices outside grew angry, the shapes pressed closer, but we held on. I could feel the weight of every story I'd ever heard, every warning I'd ever ignored. This was the moment the rules were meant for, the moment when fear threatened to tear us apart. Hours passed, the darkness pressing in, the fog swirling around the building. But we didn't break. We didn't answer the voices, didn't open the doors, didn't leave each other's side. When the first light of dawn finally crept through the windows, the voices faded, the shapes vanished, and the fog began to lift. Carter was gone, and the guilt weighed heavy on us all. But at that moment, I understood the rules weren't just about survival. They were about trust, about holding on to each other when the darkness tried to pull us apart. And as long as we remembered that, we still had a chance. The first rays of dawn were still hours away, and the station felt like an island in a sea of darkness. The voices outside had grown quieter, but the sense of something watching, waiting, was stronger than ever. Riley and I sat in the dim light, exhausted but determined not to let fear win. I knew we couldn't just wait for morning. If we did nothing, whatever hunted us would find a way in, or worse, would never leave. I remembered the stories my mother told me, the old rituals meant to keep the river spirits at bay. I also remembered my training, how to keep a team calm, how to use every tool at my disposal. I realized that survival would take both, the wisdom of the old ways and the discipline of the badge. I gathered what we had. A handful of salt from the kitchen, my father's old hunting knife, and the battered notebook of rules. I flipped through its pages, searching for anything that might help. One entry caught my eye, an old story about a sheriff who survived by making a circle of salt and reciting the rules aloud, blending tradition with whatever tools he had. I told Riley my plan. We're gonna make a circle, salt, anything that marks a boundary. We'll recite the rules, and we'll speak our names, our intentions, and claim this place as ours. We worked quickly, pouring salt in a ring around the center of the room. Riley found a piece of chalk and marked the 4 corners, just like the elders had taught. I placed the notebook and the knife at the center, a symbol of both law and tradition. We stood together in the circle, and I began to recite the rules, each one, in order, my voice growing stronger with every word. Riley joined in, his voice shaky at first, then gaining confidence. The air in the room changed, the pressure easing as if the darkness itself was listening. Then I did something I'd never done before. I spoke directly to the night, blending the old words with my own. We respect this land. We honor those who came before, but we are not yours. We are the living, and we protect this place. Let us go. The wind howled, rattling the windows, but the circle held. For a moment, the darkness seemed to hesitate, as if weighing our intent. Then, slowly, the voices faded, replaced by the gentle sound of the river outside. We stayed in the circle until the first light crept through the windows. We had bent the rules, mixed tradition with survival, but we had survived. I knew the thing outside was still out there, waiting for another mistake. But for now, we have earned our freedom. And I understood, finally, that the rules were not just about fear. They were about respect, about remembering who you are, and about standing together when the darkness comes. When dawn finally broke, The world outside the station looked almost peaceful. The fog had retreated to the riverbanks, curling low over the water like a living thing reluctant to let go. Sunlight filtered through the trees, painting the wet grass gold. The air was cold and sharp, but it was real, no longer thick with whispers or the weight of unseen eyes. Riley and I stepped outside, blinking in the pale light. The town was quiet, the streets empty, but the sense of danger had faded. We checked the perimeter, calling out for Carter, but there was no answer. His footprints led to the edge of the woods and simply vanished, swallowed by the moss and mud. I called his name one last time, but the only reply was the distant rush of the river. Back at the station, the deputies gathered, their faces drawn and tired. Some had stories of their own, strange lights in the trees, voices calling from the fog, shadows that moved against the wind. We shared what had happened, every detail, every rule we'd clung to. No one laughed at the old stories anymore. The community felt the loss. Carter's family came to the station, eyes red but proud. They knew the risks, knew the history of Ghost River County, but it didn't make the pain any less. We held a small ceremony by the river, offering sage and tobacco, whispering prayers for the lost. The elders joined us, their presence a reminder that some things are older than any law, older than any badge. In the days that followed, life in the county returned to its slow, steady rhythm. The animals came back, the sun shone a little brighter, and the river ran clear. But something had changed in all of us. We carried the memory of that night, the knowledge that the rules were not just tradition, but a shield against the darkness. We had paid a price, and the land would remember. I spent hours replaying every moment, wondering if I could have done more, if I could have saved Carter. The guilt was heavy, but so was the resolve. The rules had saved us, but they weren't perfect. The world was changing, and so were the threats we faced. I realized that survival meant more than just obedience. It meant understanding, adapting, and sometimes making new rules when the old ones weren't enough. As the sun rose higher, I pinned my badge back on and looked out over the river. Ghost River County was still my home, still my responsibility. And as long as I remembered the rules and the cost of breaking them, I knew I could face whatever the night brought next. In the quiet that followed, I found myself haunted by the events of that night. The rules had always been there, passed down from one sheriff to the next, whispered by elders, written in battered notebooks. I'd followed them out of habit, out of respect, but now I understood their true weight. They weren't just old warnings. They were the hard-earned wisdom of generations who had survived nights like the one we just endured. I thought about Carter, about the moment fear overcame him and the cost we all paid. The rules had saved us, but they weren't perfect. The world was changing, and so were the threats we faced. I realized that survival meant more than just obedience. It meant understanding, adapting, and sometimes making new rules when the old ones weren't enough. At the next department meeting, I stood before my deputies, the battered notebook in my hand. My voice was steady, but my heart ached. We all know the rules. We know why they matter. But last week showed us something new. The darkness changes. It learns. So must we. I took a pen and wrote a new line at the bottom of the page. If the fog rolls in and the voices grow too loud, gather together. Do not face the night alone." The others nodded, the weight of the night still fresh in their eyes. Riley placed his hand on my shoulder, a silent promise that we would remember, that we would not let fear divide us again. The elders, who had joined us for the meeting, murmured a blessing, sealing the new rule with the old words. I left the meeting with a new sense of purpose. The land would always hold its secrets, and the night would always test us. But as long as we remembered the rules, old and new, and stood together, we had a chance. The storm was gone, but its lesson remained. Survival is not just about following the past, but about facing the future, ready for whatever darkness comes next. Sometimes, when the wind stirs the river fog and the shadows grow long, I still hear the echoes of that night. I remember Carter's absence, the fear in Riley's eyes, and the strength we found in each other. The rules are more than tradition. They are a promise, a way to hold the darkness at bay. And now, with a new rule added, we are ready for whatever the river might bring next. Ghost River County is still my home, and I am still its sheriff. The old laws may not protect us from what hunts after dark, but as long as we have each other and the rules, we will not face the night alone. The old laws haven't changed. The courthouse still stands on Main, the same curfews are posted on the town bulletin board, and the badge I wear still means something to most folks in Ghost River County. But after what happened, I know better than to trust the law alone. There are things out here that don't care about rules written on paper, things that have been hunting these woods and riverbanks since long before the first sheriff ever pinned on a star. Most mornings, the county looks peaceful, mist curling over the water, sunlight glinting off the old bridge, kids riding their bikes down the gravel roads. Sometimes I almost believe it was all just a nightmare, a story spun by the wind and the river's endless song. But every so often, when the fog rolls in thick and the air grows heavy, I catch myself listening for something else. A whisper in the reeds, a footstep in the dark, a voice, soft and familiar, calling my name from somewhere just out of sight. People ask if the stories are true, if the rules really matter, or if we just cling to old fears because it's easier than facing the unknown. I tell them what I know. The rules are there for a reason. They're not just for the old-timers or the superstitious or the weak. They're for anyone who wants to see another sunrise. They're for anyone who's ever felt the night press in and wondered what waits just beyond the edge of the light. If you ever find yourself in Ghost River County and the wind off the water starts to sound like your own voice, remember what I told you. Don't run. Don't answer the voices. Don't break the circle. Gather together and hold fast to the rules, even when fear claws at your mind. Because the darkness is patient and it remembers every mistake. The old laws haven't changed, but neither has what hunts after dark. The land remembers, and so do I. And if you ever hear your name on the river wind, if you ever feel the world shift and the old dread settle in your bones, remember, the rules are your only shield. Break them and you might not live to tell the story. So if you're reading this, take it as a warning. The river is quiet now, but it's only sleeping. And out here, beneath the endless sky and the ancient trees, the past is never as far away as you think.